going on. They're building a ceiling that we can't get beyond, that doesn't exist. We should be able to go right through that thing. With these texts, we can do that. Anyhow, so I took the material and I sent it to Macmillan. I just scrubbed it, and then I sent it to Macmillan. And they accepted it. Thomas Dunn accepted it. And it was fantastic.
Macmillan is what?
It was St. Martin's Press.
Publishing
company. Yeah, it used to be publishing company, St. Martin's Press.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what became the book, the famous book that you created, The Chemical Muse.
Correct.
And once you you decided to scrub the chapter from your dissertation and any sort of reference to drugs whatsoever, and then they accepted it and gave you your PhD.
Any references to recreational drugs?
Recreational.
Because there are a whole bunch of drugs all over it, right? For healing. I mean, drugs that you use in anesthesia.
Right.
What did they use? Fantastic.
What was the response after your book, The Chemical Muse, was published?
The Bryn Mawr Classical Review came out, which is the big reviewer. And a European professor, French, came out and said, this book's dangerous. He said it shouldn't be read at any university, anytime, ever. And he was like,
what year are we talking?
Oh, this was 2008.
Wow.
2008.
Okay.
And so it was roundly ignored, put into the guy said, this guy obviously has a drug agenda. Like, no, let's just talk about the drugs, because they don't read these texts. Now, that same journalist has gone and talked to the aforementioned Bryn Mawr Classical Reviewist, and now they're writing a book, and it's about shamanism, all the same stuff, all the same material. It's because they didn't know it.
Mm-hmm. And it was the first one to sort of uncover this stuff and make it known.
I was not the first. I would say I was the one who took it and took the big picture of it. I was the first one to bring the science side.
Who was the first one?
Over Carl Rock.
Carl Rock.
Yeah, no, because he said they're using something in the Eleusinian Mysteries. He was already looking at. He didn't have any problem with the concept that he coined, entheogens. Right? These are substances that are in theos that bring that divine being into you. Mm-hmm. It's a whole class of drugs they were using.
Have you ever had any conversations about Carl Rock with the stuff that you discovered and this, the stuff you talk about in The Chemical Muse?
Yeah, I've had the pleasure. Once The Chemical Muse was published, they sent it to Dr. Rock for
review,
consideration. Because he's the only one who had been on the list of people who had talked about drugs, and he got shamed. He got completely shamed.
Well, look, it seems like this idea and the idea of drugs being used back then is becoming more and more accepted. I mean, you got people like Brian Mararescu and Graham Hancock. I think Brian's new book's his latest book is The Immortality Key, where he talks about the mystery cults of Eleusis and the ergot.
Yeah. I know Brian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, how did you guys meet?
Professor Rock sent him to me to get some medical stuff.
So you guys spoke about when he was working on his book?
Yeah, we had a couple of interviews before when he came up with the idea. Gave him a couple of interviews about what the sources are and what the extent of the stuff is. He said, do you mind if I mention you and Joe Rogan? And I said, yes, go ahead and do that. But if you do, you have to mention that Jesus Christ was arrested in a public park with a boy at 4 a.m. screaming, I'm not a trafficker.
You made sure you told him he needed to say that.
Say that exact phrase. And
so he did it.
So he chose. Yes. Yeah.
Right. Well, look, I mean, it was really interesting to me reading your book, and I was really gripped by what you sort of uncovered, which it makes a lot of sense when you really think about it. That life back then, life in antiquity was terrible. And people didn't die from heart disease and from diabetes and from old age like they do today. They died from hand-to-hand combat and plagues and famine.
Yeah.
And to live back then was a miserable existence for the most part. Infant mortality was like 50%.
Yeah.
And they needed these drugs just to get through the day. And the warriors fighting these wars, they needed to take these drugs to suffer these insurmountable wounds they would have to suffer in battle. Can you talk a little bit to that and to like some of the details that you uncover in your book about what life was like and how hard it was and the amount of death and plague and famine and how these drugs were used to curb these sort of ailments?
Yeah. The best way is to resurrect the soul of Hippocrates and to look at the works that he wrote called The Epidemics, in which he describes all the diseases that people are getting, what they're suffering from, all the ailments. Oh, my God. You know what herpes does when it goes untreated?
No.
Oh, Hippocrates has descriptions of it. They call it herpes because their word herpeton is their word for a snake or something that slithers, something that crawls. Because that's what herpes does when it goes untreated. It crawls all over you. It rots you.
Thank God I don't know about that.
You get descriptions of this kind of stuff, and you
Right.
see life on a different, at a different level. 1/3 of women were having death as a side effect of birth.
1/3 of women were dying from childbirth.
Yeah. The problems are bleeding.
Right.
They're constantly trying to control bleeding and whatnot. With drugs. Oh, miserable. And, about 1/3 of the population of the youth from in the late teens, that's getting eaten off. They become soldiers, and a certain number of those get sacrificed. Right? It's not cheapness. They don't have there isn't a sense of futility. It's looked at as a sacrifice.
And what point in history are we talking about?
Oh, God, as far back as the Bronze Age, all the way down to about Byzantine.
The Bronze Age is older than the 5th century?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. In the best time of the Bronze Age, it was late Bronze Age, around 1200 to 1100.
1200 to 1100.
Yeah,
that's where some of these oldest texts that you've read come from.
Yeah, the Mycenaean Linear B stuff comes from like 1600 BC, which is that's spectacular. They've got Dionysus and all that stuff. I worked with M. Bennett, who was a Navy cryptographer who studied cracked Linear B. And in it we have the name Dion. He's the son of Zeus the Thunderer. And it was a gorgeous, gorgeous world to be able to follow that. But that's where the Greek can take you. Sign up for courses now.
Well, let me ask you this. How, and this is sort of like broad strokes questions.
Yeah.
How did your development, your understanding of these ancient texts and reading this ancient Greek and even the Hebrew, everything that you've read, how did that change your perspective on religion and Christianity and Catholicism? You were raised, Christian or Catholic?
I love Jesus, man. I don't know.
What was your family?
Baptist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So once you start to understand the history and the texts, how did this change your worldview of religion? And what sort of misconceptions did you have that were shattered by this understanding?
I had a long-term relationship with a muse. So the whole time that I'm developing this educationally... Oh, look, I was just going to bring the Antichrist.
Oh, it's happening, guys. The Antichrist is coming, everybody. Tornado warning. Don't bring him yet.
Okay.
Hold him off.
Okay.
Hold off, Zeus. These texts that you're reading and that you're translating, are these the original sources of religion? Of Christianity and Catholicism and baptism and all this stuff? Is this like the originals?
Yeah, this is the language that held that, all of those texts. So the New Testament's all written in ancient Greek, right? What you call the Old Testament, and I'm going to shock people with this one, what you call the Old Testament, which people say is written in Hebrew, right, which is not a language that I work with. I had to take a little bit of modern Hebrew when I was there, just because it was part of the, education. And, but the text that you think is written in Hebrew is not. It's a Greek text that's written in the 3rd century. It's a Hellenistic text called, that you call the Torah or the Old Testament. That is not an original Hebrew text. Now, well, how can I say that? What we have is the Septuagint that I'm talking about. It's the Greek Old Testament. Do you understand Greek Old Testament?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's the oldest form that we've got.
Okay.
Okay. The whole big deal about the Dead Sea Scrolls was they said, aha, we finally have some Hebrew, because none of it survives, right? Hebrew is only an 8,000 word, ancient Hebrew, 8,000 word, unique word count language.
Okay.
Which puts it in the realm of something you could expend by the end of your breakfast. 8,000 words.
Right.
No, that's not a lot.
Okay. And the Dead Sea Scrolls were all in Hebrew?
And the Dead Sea Scrolls were fragments in Hebrew and fragments in Greek, and everybody assumed, oh, this is the original in Hebrew, right? Because now we're following church history. You and I live in a time, in the stream, the time stream. We live when we think that there was an original Hebrew text of the Old Testament, but there wasn't. It doesn't exist, right? And to show people the Greek, no, what's the proof? What's the proof? The proof is when you read the Septuagint, that is the Greek Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
It does not read as a translation. It reads as an original. It uses Greek idiom. It's like a fingerprint on the language, and it's got Greek.
How can you tell it?
Greek fingerprints.
How do you discern the difference, whether it be an original or a translation?
Oh, you can tell. It's easy to tell because colloquialisms don't translate, right? And so it's like tagging it. So you're testing this language to see what its age is. Okay. So you tag it with certain things. And one of them is colloquialisms, right? The other one is technical vocabulary. You cannot translate from a higher technical degree to you can't translate from a medium technical degree to a high technical degree.
Okay.
You can go down the slope. You can take something that's not technical,
break it down to the smallest term,
right? And make it more technical, right?
Right.
Force that. So that you can't drift upstream.
Right.
So the original is going to have the highest degree of technicality.
Yes. So the Dead Sea Scrolls were not the highest degree of technical writing. They were lower. They were lower than the Greek. What was the word? The book you were talking about.
They're Hebrew back translations because of the time. The Dead Sea Scrolls. They're Hebrew back translations. So they took the Greek.
Of what specifically?
They took the Greek and they said, how do we translate this into Greek?
Okay.
That's why you lose all the technical terms because they didn't have them in their language.
And what I'm asking is, God, that's crazy. This is the first podcast I can remember where the lightning's been this crazy, this loud. So the Dead Sea Scrolls came from where? What were the sources of the Dead Sea Scrolls?
So those caves in Qumran, right? They've dated these things to probably, I've heard as early as 1st BC, but all the way up to 2nd Anno Domini. So somewhere in that range, somebody is taking the Greek text that we know is already established because people are quoting it. Right, we know, for example, they had the Book of Enoch in Greek because people are quoting it in Greek. So that's how you can like track your library. Where's your library at the time? Right, that's how you track it. By the way,
have you read the Book of Enoch?
Yeah, I read the Giza fragments of it. I can say that about it.
What do you think about all these people talking about Anunnaki aliens flying around and building pyramids back in the day?
I think it's silly.
You do? Damn it! You know how many podcasts we've done with people who claim that they're experts on the Anunnaki?
Yeah, it seems to be a big area, but they were drug users, bro. What can you expect? That's what they taught in the Giza text. It says they taught the women the art of drugs.
So these weren't aliens, they were just drug users. They were just drug addicts.
They were giants, bro.
They were giants?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like real giants?
Gigantas.
Steve, are you crunching?
Oh, you can hear that.
Oh my God!
No, I liked it.
It's this is the ASMR podcast. There's stimulus everywhere.
They taught them the drug craft. That's what the text says. And you don't understand, man. They've got Medusae at the time. You say,
wait. Go back to giants.
Yeah.
What are you talking about, giants?
That's the Greek word, gigantas.
Giants meaning physically they were huge people?
No.
Okay.
Right? No. They had a superior knowledge of the drugs, and they had a group of women who were called the Medusae. And the Medusae could hit you with a drug on an arrow and paralyze you. And they would take you and do things to you. And that's how a group of these women functioned. That's how they hunted. They hunted men. You can imagine a society where
women that hunted men.
Yeah, you have to kill 3 men in order to get married.
Amazon.
Yeah, and they don't really marry you. They just farm men.
And when is this? What time period? What is this?
This is Bronze Age, late Bronze Age.
Bronze Age.
Okay. Like 1200, the peak at 1200, say BC.
1200.
This is when
it just shows you how women have been here before everyone.
Yeah. And
so back, okay. Well, this is great. I'm loving this. But back to my original question.
Women are the originals.
Fundamentally, how did your understanding and learning all of this ancient Greek change your understanding of how religion is preached today and the story of the Bible?
It's a fairy tale.
Because they
it's a fairy tale. What they teach now and do now is not even a hair's breadth of semblance to what they did originally. Yeah, you don't understand. Mystery is not a word that means a question or something you don't know. Right? The mystery is the performance that brings you through death back into life. And once you've been initiated into that environment, you're given keys, things to open up, a way to decode what's being said, so that you understand what's at the higher level. Now, if you're like Jesus, you do that with 12 children.
Oh, fuck.
People don't realize that. The apostles are just children.
Pump the brakes, we'll get there.
Oh, okay.
Right, slow down, dude. God damn.
We're going to get there, don't worry.
He's steady trying to spin that block. He's going to ruin everything there is to know.
So loud.
This is the best day of my life.
Is it really?
Thank you for allowing me to come.
I was going to say, you had a terrible life. This is the best day.
Fuck.
In Greece, in Athens,
I need this information.
We're talking the Iron Age or the Bronze Age, when they started to develop these mystery cults of Eleusis. What time was this?
Yeah, this is late Bronze Age. Late Bronze Age.
And
a couple of generations before the Trojan War.
And this is when they were experimenting with these drugs that would these psychotropic drugs like ergot and other things.
crazy. So there's several classes. One of them, the Death Bringers. That's one we talked about.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Verso. Have you ever tried fasting or intermittent fasting? If so, you may be aware of the sizzling energy and mental clarity that you get if you do it long enough. The scientific data validating the health benefits from fasting for weight loss is overwhelming. But what doesn't get talked about enough is the longevity benefits you get from fasting. When you fast, your body turns on all its defense mechanisms to help your body hunker down to fight off illness and disease. But the problem is it takes 3 days of starving yourself to activate this process. Scientists like David Sinclair have recently discovered
Time to do another
molecules to help
fast.
your body
Thanks for the
turn on
heads
this
up,
process
buddy.
without having to fast.
Here's how to never have to worry about money after a car accident. Listen,
Don't buy a
been in a
car.
car accident
Yeah.
in the past year. Even as a passenger, you could be owed a significant cash payout. Insurance companies do not want you to know this and don't want you to find out what your accident is truly worth. So they can send you a low offer, hoping you accept it just to be done with the hassle. Within a few clicks, you could find out what your accident could actually qualify for just by clicking the link around this video. You answer 5 simple multiple choice questions, and it only takes 30 seconds and is 100% free. If you missed work or got hurt by a driver in the last year, you might be owed money without even knowing it. You could get thousands, maybe even more. Think now to find out. By doing this, you don't have to go to court, pay big legal fees, deal with greedy insurance companies, or plead your case to attorney after attorney. If you have been in an accident, even as a passenger, you can get the compensation you truly deserve.
If you've ever heard this podcast before, you've heard me talk about Verso many times, and I've had world-renowned nutritional scientists like Dominic D'Agostino on the show, who is the guy who actually introduced me to Verso, and I've been taking it every day for the last 3 years. Cell Being is always the first thing I take in the morning after dragging my carcass into the kitchen, which wakes me up and gives me energy. I even use it for pre-workout. And Clean Being is the product I use every night before bed. After taking Clean Being for some time now, I have actually noticed a huge improvement in not only my hormone regulation, but my vision has improved. I know it sounds insane, but this stuff actually can improve your vision. My lipid regulation has gotten better. And another huge thing is, all of a sudden, I don't get affected by all the pollen in the air. I don't have any of these reactions. And Clean Being has actually been scientifically proven to alleviate these things. Other clinical trials have proven healthier skin, less inflammation, healthier hair, lipid regulation, enhanced cognitive function, and improved metabolism. On top of that, Verso always publishes third-party testing on each batch produced to guarantee you're getting exactly what you pay for. So if you want to check out Verso and support this podcast at the same time, go to buy.ver.so/Danny and use the coupon code Danny at checkout for 15% off your first order. Again, that's buy.ver.so/DANNY and use the coupon code Danny for 50% off your first order. It's linked below. Now back to the show.
Now there's the ones that make you crazy. And
Permanently?
No, temporarily. And they would have people cured, quote unquote cured, because they've got antidotes. We even have stories about people going out and he's like, "Oh, my daughters, they went off on their cult thing and they're still not coming down. What do we do?" And he has to go whip them up an antidote
Right.
for them to stop being in this state of mania. And it's things like hyoscyamine, scopolamine, and atropine, containing huoscoumos is the Greek word, and it's these plants that contain these substances that they found them in hair, painted on hair because they're offerings.
And what was the what did they gain by taking these drugs, and what sort of what did they learn? What sort of enlightenment did they achieve? What was the ends to the use of these drugs for them?
Yeah. We have instead of me making something up, you could read the Mithras Liturgy in the Greek magical papyri, where it talks about what you'll see and how you should interact and what you have to do.
Oh, they had like a protocol.
Yeah. It's like a manual.
Wow.
Yeah, and you gotta have the right things to bring with you, because you gotta make the drugs. right? You get there and first of all, you're going to be fasting for a certain number of days. And they put you through these repetitious songs, right? We have these in the PGM where you're setting the images in your head. Remember, this is idolatry. Eidolon is the word for image. Right? Image. And there's, so when we're on our snake venom, and you've got a concoction with and they're using tons of snake stuff. I got an entire author for you. Watch this. Philuminous is his name. Philuminous with a PH on the front. He is a physician somewhere before the 4th century because they start quoting him in the 4th. And he's a physician who talks about the venoms. I've got a couple of slides of him. He talks about the venoms that are used. Some great stuff, by the way.
Snake venoms were used as mind-altering drugs, or they were used as antidotes?
They were used as medicines.
Medicines.
Right. The Medusa really exist, right? They're women. They're a group of women. These are Scythian tribes, by the way. What I mean by that, tribes that are, they were a horse culture, mobile, and they ravaged people. That's how they, got what they needed.
And the Medusa were the ones that you said they had to kill a certain amount of men before they could get married?
It's the same tribes that are producing that specific group of women. They have this cult thing where they apply the medicine to their hair. They wear it in their hair, and they use arrows. And that poison can petrify you. And they'll drag you off, and they'll do things to you.
Like what, eat your brain?
No, it's sexy stuff. They'll either mate or kill you. Yeah, it's a shame to have to end up a relationship.
That's weird that back then you would have to poison a man to have sex with him, right? Like, wouldn't a guy just want to have sex with some chick?
These are people being raided. Imagine being raided.
I mean, it's hard to rape a man if you're a woman, right?
So you gotta give them drugs to make them hard when you're being them, because you're too.
Why don't you own apartment buildings? Seriously, why don't you own these big apartment buildings?
What effects did drug use have on the philosophy of Western society and the democratic forms of governance?
Yeah, so it's a part of the fabric of pushing society toward inspiration, looking for sources of inspiration. All the earliest Greek temples are temples of the muses. So that written word connection is very, very important. And bring up magic. People want to know, what is magic, right? Classically. And classically, it's that control of the logos. It's a control. People think logos, so that's a Greek word, right? Oh, then seminarians get all excited, and they don't really know it, because seminarians don't read classical texts. The logos is that reason, that reckoning.
Okay.
So that's what, to me, that's what I studied so carefully. That's why classicists study ancient Greek. Yeah, they do.
Who is Solon?
Solon, he's a reformer. He's a rich reformer who basically turns and gives power back to the people. He was advised by this guy on crack. He carried it around in the hoof of something, and it was a plant they said he ground up and snorted all the time. He advised Solon, and Solon's reforms ultimately become what you and I know as democracy.
What is the proper definition of democracy in antiquity compared to our democracy today?
Yeah, it's the rule of the people, if you want. It's the rule of the people. The demos is just the neighborhood. Athens is divided up into deans.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The hood. You get a neighborhood speak. That's what democracy is. It's a neighborhood speak. And it's direct representation, too. And they've got all sorts of reforms, like, look, you cannot take any money while you are You know, part of the boule, part of
Right.
the council. You can't
Right.
you can't take any money, and you have to have terms and everything.
And I
It's what
believe
inspired Jefferson.
part of your book says that there was 300,000 people in Athens, right? Is that and then 10% of them were part of these councils?
That sound. That's right.
There was like 30,000 of them were part of these councils that made the rules and made the laws and
Right.
and
They have a couple of assemblies, the boule and the ecclesia. Yeah, which
Right.
becomes our word for church.
well, I love the way that your book described the differences between our democratic republic that we have in America compared to their version of democracy. And you had all these people that would have to debate all these ideas and rules and laws and punishment for crimes. And I think you said that people only were able to do this for 1 year at a time. They had like 1 year terms or
Yeah.
whatever.
It was different at different times, but
Right. And what we have now is so far away from that. Very, very far away from that.
well, we don't have juries with 300 people either. Can you imagine that? Just big crowd of people from the polis doing the city thing, right? They're exercising their politeia. That's where we get our word politics, right? The functioning of the city.
And they were vehemently against people who could gain any sort of benefit in this system or make any sort of money or any sort of economic gain from this system to corrupt it. Like it was like their version of democracy was essentially to protect humanity from itself.
Yeah, exactly. It put the brakes. It was the ultimate check and balance. Definitely. And it's what inspired our democracy, the thing we call democracy. Yeah.
But our democracy is so much different. I mean, if you look at all the people that are in the government and have been in the government making decisions and making millions of dollars for so long, it is run by tyrants.
Yes, that's how you know, the Greeks said. They said whoever is profiting, watch who's profiting, and you cannot have the running of the state with somebody profiting from it, because when you do, it becomes corrupt.
Everyone knows you need a lawyer after a car accident. But what if I told you there's a better way? One that gets you more money in 30 seconds without the 40% lawyer fees. Let me show you something that's changing everything.
They knew that. You have to keep that government sacred. You have to keep it sacred.
Right.
Yeah.
And Solon was one of the originals responsible for the creation of democracy.
Yeah, well, yeah, things that led to ultimately what you and I would say, voila, democracy.
And how long did this last?
You could argue that this is a process that doesn't start and end, but it's a process that cycles throughout time. And the deity, this is where it gets cool. The deity that we put on the hill is that warrior girl. Yeah, we put a warrior girl on the hill, and you know what she does? She nourishes the Serpent King. Isn't that funny? She gives him her hyma,
What does this mean?
her blood. Drink my blood. Yep. They're using blood as a medicinal. Yeah, the Virgin Queen. She's the one who raises that Serpent King. Yep. No, they've got them. You can go to Athens today. Go to the top of the... Look for the Erexium in the top of the place and be like, where is he? Where's the Serpent King? He's there.
Who is the Serpent King? Steven, can you find this guy?
Look for Ericthonius.
Ericthonius?
Yeah.
Ericthonius.
He's from the ground, baby. Chthon. When Jesus is on the cross and he's like, I am thirsty. Sabachthon.
All right. That's what Jesus said when he was on the cross?
Yeah.
Is this in the Bible?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Why would I make this up?
Well, I'm not saying you're making it up. I'm just trying to distinguish the difference between what's in the Bible and what's in the text. And I assume that they're drastically different, right?
No, I will give you the hardcore evidence.
What is the difference?
It's just the text.
What
I'm
is
just going to bring you a Greek text, and this is from the biblical Greek text.
Well, my question is, how big of a gap is there between the original texts and the Bible people read today?
Okay, so these are the texts that are ultimately assembled into what you call the Bible.
Right.
Those are the same thing, right? This is the
so there's only some pieces, like there's a huge load of ancient Greek texts, and only certain pieces are cherry-picked for the Bible.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. What's the common thread uniting all of these things together? It's the cults, man, and the operation of the cults. They're driving the literature at the time. They've got a hostage and they're bringing it in. And you can get that from the read. All you got to do is bring up those cults and their activities. The stuff the early Christians were doing. They're collecting blood. And this is from their own insiders who are telling us this. Eustathius tells us this. And he says, oh my God, he says, look what they're doing in these ceremonies. And he goes on to describe it, and I've described it in detail. But they collect the blood.
Who is this guy?
Fetal blood.
Who's Erechthonius?
Oh, this king of this serpent king.
Can you pull up a description of him, Steve?
I
need Wikipedia's description to give me the truth, so I can keep Ahmed in check.
Erechthonius in Greek mythology, King Erechthonius was a legendary early ruler of ancient Athens. According to some myths, he was born of the soul.
Autochthonous. Exactly. And what happens is Hephaestus comes along and he's like, wow, look at the beauty of what we've made.
He was adopted and raised by Athena.
With this virgin Athena. Her name is Athana.
Okay.
In Dorian.
So how did we get... Okay, so explain to people listening how we got to Erechthonius from Solon creating democracy.
It's that line. It's the drug-using mystery that drives everything. Cicero says his life was begun again. He was reborn. What happened? He went to the great resurrection.
So these guys were taking drugs and having some great transcendental experience, right? And they were similar to people when they take crazy psychedelic trips today, right? They call it the ego death, and they do ayahuasca ceremonies. This is what's happening to people back then. Is that what you're kind of describing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a death to life. I think it's a death to life experience. It's a rebirth, or what they described anyway as a rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, they put you. The drug concoction is incredible. We have it in Nero's library. We have it. We have the exact concoction that they used.
Has anybody ever tried to recreate it?
Did you know the U.S. just announced the launch of a crypto strategic reserve consisting of Bitcoin? If you want to join the party but think it's too complicated, make it easier with Kraken. Buy over 275 cryptocurrency. With just a couple of clicks, fund your account in seconds. Get access to over 300...
I've tried to get people to do so.
Have you asked Hamilton to try to recreate it?
He said, give me the formula, so I did.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got it. Well, could he? It's got a lot of stuff in it that I don't know if he could actually produce.
Right.
It's got like 7 snake venom.
7 different snake venoms.
Yeah, you can put it up your butt.
Oh my God.
Is that how they typically did it back in the day?
Chronic.
Like a suppository?
Yeah, we've got a description of a guy who, his priestess, she's spanking him with some stinging nettles, right, on his chin. And she's inserting that into his ass. You know, it's a rectal drug administration. And we have a text that describes it. It's called a satiricon. Satyrion was the word they used in Latin. It's from Greek. That is the drug that causes you to have priapism. Right?
What is priapism?
is in this constant.
Okay. And this is what the Medusa used on their victims?
Too late? Is it too late for that? Is it too early? Can we talk about that now?
It's still too early. Yeah, we've still got more stuff to know.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, we're going to go really deep into all of the really crazy stuff here. In a little bit, we're going to cut off and go to Patreon. But I want to lay a solid foundation for your work and your research before we go there. So, back to ancient Greece. Democracy is formed by Solon, and Aristotle and Plato. Where do they come into the picture?
There are a couple of Smarties.
Yeah. And who else was there? Pythagoras?
Yeah, he's a little bit earlier, and he's founding. He's the one who said, by the way, that they came to him and asked him they were going to send out a colony, and the oracle had given a go-ahead. And you have to understand, this is coming from late Bronze Age governmental tech, where you have oracles that rule, that tell you who can go to war with who, which tyrant needs to be executed. Right? If you send an embassy out and they ask the oracle and she says, execute him. Right? What about this leader we got? And she's execute him. That's it. He's dead.
What is so special about this oracle?
They start with these drugs. They use the drugs that those Scythian tribes are using up on the Black Sea. And they're causing this transformation that they describe as adamantine freedom. So freedom that is not corruptible. Right? It's a form of government. That's why they call them the Medusae. From Medua. It's an old Mycenaean concept. Yeah. Anywho.
We were talking briefly earlier about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you said the Dead Sea Scrolls part of them were written in Hebrew, and they were back translated from earlier Greek, right?
Yeah, no, none of them were originally written in Hebrew. They're all originally written in Greek. That's why they had complete Greek texts with them.
Greek was the first.
There was no Hebrew spoken at the time. Hebrew had become a liturgical language. Right by the 2nd century BC.
Well, why Greek?
I stood in a synagogue in Israel, 2nd century, and you know it was written? There was nothing in Hebrew. It was all Greek.
Really?
And people are, you can check me on it, right? They all are. They all have zodiacs. Right?
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah.
That's all reflected in the language. It's like a fingerprint, man. You can track this stuff. The Old Testament, if I say anything today, the Old Testament is a work of the 3rd century. And it's originally in Greek. Yeah, the name Eve, Ewa, is the shout that a Bacchant makes.
Eve is the shout that a Bacchant?
Bacchant.
What's a Bacchant?
It's a woman under the influence of some pretty powerful drugs. So,
everything is about drugs. There's nothing that's not about drugs. Is there anything in history that has nothing to do with drugs, or is it all drugs?
Yeah, but it was boring.
You just refuse to acknowledge it if it's not about drugs. That's what I'm taking from this. Is that right?
No, it's just so many drugs. Yeah, no, the bacchanalia, right? The ecstasy, the place we get the concept ecstasy is from the state that one of these women would be in, and they could murder you, and it was totally friggin' legal. And that was one of the things that they like to do. You know why? You get a bloodthirst. Does that bother you?
You get a bloodthirst.
Yeah, because you carry around these baskets. We have these represented full of snakes and demons.
Do you ever just find when you're looking through these texts, do you ever maybe I'm not looking at this from a neutral perspective. Maybe I got somehow corrupted at some point, and I'm only looking for the stuff that's going to fly in the face of academia because they fucked me over when I was doing my dissertation.
No. What drags me in is the Christ. I'm still looking for Jesus.
that's the one thing.
That term, Christ, is a pharmaceutical term.
Is it possible that the texts that you've read that tell you some of these things can be translated in different ways or seen from different perspectives? Or is what you're saying that these texts say, is that objective fact?
No, I'm all about sources, and you have to be genuine to your source. So when I say something, I know it sounds outrageous, but there's a source that does exactly what I just said. That's all I'm supposed to do as a journalist, is report to you the sources. And let me give you an example. There's a guy named Nonus, and Nonus, he writes a paraphrase of John, the Gospel of John. Okay, and in it, Nonus talks about like Mary's alabastron and that whole secta event, and what
Mary's what?
Alabastron.
What does that mean?
Oh, it's an oil-containing device. It's
okay.
There's the older forms of it that are bigger. Aristophanes makes fun of it on the stage.
Okay. Aristophanes was an ancient. He was a playwright. Comedian, like an ancient comedian.
The father.
But he did plays. They were like plays.
Father, come on, man.
Wow.
This is Aristophanes. He's the one. They march out on stage, you know.
Yeah, the last chapter of your book was all about him.
Yeah.
It was fascinating hearing that, you know, back then they were able to make fun of, you know, the top elite part of the society and the people in government, and he made fun of Socrates, ripped Socrates, right?
Yeah, it's the stage is a religious place. The stage in antiquity was not for entertainment. Nobody's getting rich off of it.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing is we're purifying the people. Yeah. And so they needed that. They needed that humor. The Romans carried the same thing. To their credit, this hot-dwelling Roman. To their credit, they did bring this protection as well. And you see it on their imperial side when you've got a whole bunch of people surrounding Julius Caesar, yelling at him things like, "Are you sleeping with the king?" You know, stuff like that, because he was visiting someplace. They're trying to ward off the maleficio. The magic that's bad, the bad making.
What do you ever, like, when you're reading these texts, how do you know what you're reading isn't sort of like an ancient, because I'm sure people in ancient times, when they were writing, everybody, whether you're a journalist or whatever it is, everybody has an axe to grind, right?